Hey, it's Chris. Quick note today before we get into a conversation with Dan Bartley from ProCFO Partners is there's a bit of a lag happening from time to time between Dan and I in our conversation. You're going to see that in the video. That's just how it goes in the world of constant Zoom meetings and remote communications and pandemics and hurricanes and everything else. The message and the meaning from Dan is certainly not lost. I really enjoyed the conversation. Let's get into it.
This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
This is Chris Bintliff. I'm with Dan Bartley from ProCFO Partners. And Dan, we're talking today about transaction advisory, which is a fancy collection of words. Talk me through that just a little bit. How do you define from your position at ProCFO Partners and as a CFO, what's a transaction?
Transaction come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. Can be anything from as simple as a bank loan to as sophisticated as an investment, somebody coming in and investing in your company, or buying or selling a company. Those are the basic transactions. And as I said, they vary in complexity.
So when you're working with someone and they're thinking, I'm thinking about making a purchase here, I'm thinking of buying a competitor. How do you know when it's the right time to do that? Or what kind of coaching or guidance do you look for so that you can deliver the right, is it the right time? Is it the right situation, the right station for the company?
Well, if you're at that point where you're looking to grow, and there's two types of growth. There's organic growth, which is when you do it internally, and you've reached a point in your company where you've really maxed out on what you can do internally. And therefore, there's opportunities to buy another company that you could very nicely put into your own company and grow rapidly through that type of acquisition. And there's so many factors that go into that also. It's the industry you're in, it's the right time, there's supply and demand considerations. But if you're in growth mode and you think you can take it on, it's the time to do it.
How do you kind of reconcile the strategic sometimes conflict between, look, we set out a 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 year plan, but this opportunity just showed up. And it might mean that we need to take on more debt than we had planned for, but we really got to do this. Or the marketplace demand has changed from a year ago when we were thinking it would be something else. We really got to do this. What do you think is the bridge that you build there between this isn't something we expected, but we really need to do it? How does that conversation go sometimes?
Well, you got to be ready. These are always very, very serious decisions. So not only do you have to be ready, your whole team has to be ready. Yeah. Your bank has to be ready. Whoever your capital advisors are have to be ready. Your law firm, your accounting firm, everybody has to be ready if you're going to enter into a transaction that's really substantially outside of what you were planning. You can do it, but you have to plan it exceptionally well because a lot can go wrong. But if you do it right, my experience has been that it works out quite well.
Do you find that there's when the planets haven't aligned, the team isn't ready, or there's a couple of pretty strong naysayers to this? I imagine it can, and in my experience, it can really throw a wrench into the leadership system. Even the whole sort of strategic vision of the company can get kind of sidelined because we get into some internal issues about, is this the right time or whatever. So when you talk about readiness, not only do your banking relationships have to be sound and your financial situation needs to be sound, but I imagine that you feel like your leadership, your strategic leadership, and especially trust in those C-suite, the higher ups who are going to make these decisions, that needs to maybe be one of those criteria for, are you ready? Do you have the strength in that space? Do you agree?
Yes. And there's also another side of the equation, which is the target company. And they're dealing exactly with the same issues. Is their management team ready? Are they prepared? Are they motivated? And every target acquisition has its skeletons, has its opportunities and problems. And so it's not just dealing with your side of the equation. You have to deal with this other side of the equation at the same time. And sometimes that can be more difficult, but it's equally important.
Which raises the opposite question. So if I'm that company, how do I know when I'm ready to sell?
Well, what's interesting is most businesses sell not because of the economic implications. Most businesses sell because the owner has made the decision, it's time.
Interesting.
And that's been my experience. Most people think it's because, I got my value of my company is so built up, now's the time. That is not the case. It's the owner has decided for whatever reason, I'm ready to move on. And what they need to do, and where we can also be extremely helpful, is that's an entire preparation process. And it starts with their financial statements being correct. And more often than not, if we don't have audited financial statements that we're dealing with, they're wrong. Either the financial statements are overstated or understated, normally understated, and they have to be right, or that's the first step in a transaction that gets in the way and can make a transaction blow up because the numbers aren't right. It questions the integrity of management and brings into question the entire transaction.
So this idea of selling is interesting because that might be, as you said, the owner's ready. And in my experience, there can be a lot of justifications, but really comes down to the owner's ready. Or as Nelson and I had a conversation last week, he's ready to get on the boat. That's it. He's done. That can be a part of the strategic imperatives where we said, look, a year or 3 or 5 or 10, we know we want to sell. And so we might have in our back of our minds as we're thinking about things, we want to get to a point where selling is the right thing. Do we keep that? How do we keep that? How do we keep the company moving in a direction that is self-sufficient for its company success, but also keeping in mind, look, we're trying to get to a place where this thing is as valuable as it can get?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And every company should be in that mode at all points because it's inevitable. It will come to the point. It's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road where the decision will be made for whatever reason that you want to sell. So you should be preparing all along. Make sure your internal controls are proper. Make sure your processing and procedures are proper. Make sure, as I said, your numbers are correct. And that you really understand your business, you position yourself properly in the industry, and your employees are top notch, and your IT is in place. A lot that goes into planning, entering into transaction, and to do it beforehand is the best way to do it.
That really raises an interesting point because I think the same is true. Like if you are approached with someone who says, "Look, I might be interested in acquiring your company," if you're ready to have that conversation, it's obviously a lot smoother than, "Oh, wow, we have to figure out how to even start that conversation." And you're saying if you just operate from a place of proactivity all the time, so that you're always ready, you can start those conversations. But I also think that helps you get a better sense of your own value and even helps you strategically. If you're sort of always ready because you've got your ducks all in a row, you know your strengths and weaknesses so much better than somebody who hasn't done that sort of examination, which can help you no matter what's going on. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And what you get out of that, and you just alluded to it, is efficiencies. So as you're constantly making yourself better, you're becoming more efficient. It's inevitable. You constantly should be doing self-evaluation, not just in preparation of sale, but you should be doing that anyway. But if you do that well and you do it over time, by the time that decision comes to sell, you'll be more valuable, and it'll be a much easier process. If not, the opposite is true. You're going to be in some kind of emergency mode where you're going to have to do all this planning on short notice, and it can be tough. It's doable, but it makes it more difficult.
Which, none of us are at our best when we're suddenly in emergency mode trying to check all these boxes. And I've been through experiences before where 6 months after the sale, we're still cleaning up. There's still some, weird outpost little office that the IT hasn't, or the website hasn't been converted, or these small details, the fine strokes that get left out somewhere because readiness wasn't there. And that stuff can really get in the way down the road, just where the marketplace is concerned.
Not only does it get in the way, it can be very expensive. So if things like that come out during the process instead of before the process, you want to be the one who identifies the situations in your company that could be questions, that could be concerns, because you can address them. If you wait until the potential buyer finds them, it's very expensive. They start discounting the value of the business. And at that point, there's not much you can do about it.
So Dan, when we're thinking about this idea of maybe we should acquire a company, how do I know if it's the right thing to keep growing my company as is and say, that's interesting, but I'm not quite ready, versus I'm going to take the risk, because it's always a risk, isn't it? To buy this company. Do you have any coaching or advice or guidance on how you know it's the right time to grow and just focus on that versus it's the right time to start thinking about acquisition? Your company has reached some sort of stage. How do you identify that?
Well, there's a couple of things that I try to establish right up front. And the first thing is the timeline for the ownership team. Are they in this for the long haul? They have to identify their own time horizons, because For an acquisition to take hold and for you to really benefit from it takes many years. It could take 3, 5, 7 years. You got to make sure, the owner has to make sure that that time horizon is that long. B, if you're not set already running extremely efficiently with the right people in place, the right management team in place, clean that up first before you do an acquisition, because those issues will not go away, and they'll even get worse.
So the preparedness, there's a whole level of sort of consultation that should happen before you're even thinking you should acquire a company. It's really, is your company even ready internally to start thinking like that? There's a maturity aspect to it. And I don't mean necessarily length of time you've been in business, but are you conducting yourself with the maturity where acquisition or making a big purchase like that is the right move for you? Because the whole wheels could fall off if it isn't. Everything could go south if it isn't.
Absolutely. And you also have to be in the right industry at the right time.
Yeah.
So certain industries peak and grow. You don't want to be in a growing through acquisition industry that's declining. You won't get full benefit out of it. Also, your banking relationships and funding relationships have to be lined up. You could think you're ready to do an acquisition, but it takes money. And it's a combination of seller debt very often, and outside debt, and internal debt. But those have to be lined up, because you can go through all this work, and if you didn't qualify or are not going to be able to get the money you need to make the acquisition happen, it won't happen, and you've wasted a lot of time.
Dan, in your experience, what's the real driving force in either of these transactions? Either I want to buy a company or I'm ready to sell my company. What's really going on? What's really driving that?
It's valuation, valuation, valuation. So your company's worth something today, and that needs to be established. Your financial statements are correct. You're in the right industry, the right time, good management team. Your valuation today can be established. And then there's, what am I going to be worth in the future if I do this transaction? Either I sell to the buyer, they're going to be wondering, how much is this going to be worth to me in the future? And that's how it's determined. It comes down to valuation, valuation, valuation. Who are we today? What will we be in the future? And how can we look at that and make good decisions about how to make that happen?
Dan Bartley from ProCFO Partners. Dan, thanks so much for sharing some time with me today talking about transaction advisory. Fascinating stuff. Appreciate your expertise and guidance as always.
My pleasure. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.